the bandsaw. It's probably the most versatile machine in the workshop. It's so good. I've got two. When you come to buy one, which one do you go for? So let me take you back a little while. When I was 16 and I was doing my apprenticeship, I was working for a big cabinet making firm, and we had a massive big resaw for resawing timber, and then we had a big bandsaw, and then we had a smaller bandsaw for more intricate work. Because I liked woodwork so much, I set up my own little workshop in my garage, and I bought a little firm bandsaw. It was the smallest, cheapest one I could find at the time. Didn't have much money. I just wanted to set up a little workshop. I used that machine a lot. I hammered it. It's done all kinds for me. But then I needed something with a bigger cut capacity, so I bought this one. It's been okay. It served me well. It's done what it needed to do, but it wasn't the best. So then I seen this one up for sale, second hand, and I needed to upgrade the quality. So I went and bought this one, and I was going to sell this and get rid of it, but then I thought, well, no, because I can have one for ripping wood and one for doing curved work. So I ended up keeping the two. It's probably one of the first machines that you're going to buy if you're setting up your own workshop, whether that's commercial or a home. So which one do you buy? There's a lot of difference in the quality. When you're going to buy one, think about how much you're going to use it. If you're just going to be a weekend woodworker and you're going to use it once a month, a couple of times a year, then you're probably better off with a budget one. If you're going to be using it more often, then maybe upgrade. My advice with tools and machines is always buy the best you can afford. They're a good investment. Even second-hand machines, they still hold the value. As I said, I bought this second-hand. It's a great machine. So you're probably better off buying a great second-hand machine rather than a not so good brand new machine. That's my advice. But they're not much good if they're not set up properly. So I'll take you through how I set up bandsaws, and hopefully if you're new to woodworking, it should show you how to set up the bandsaw correctly and also keep you safe as well. So now that you've bought your nice new bandsaw or your nice old bandsaw, you're going to want to think about blade selection. Now the one that comes with new machines is probably a load of crap. Bin it, buy yourself a decent one. If it comes with a second-hand machine, it might be alright, it might be well worn. This is a machine from Axminster Power Tools here in the UK, and I also get my blades from Axminster. They're called Axcaliber, good name, and I go for the ground tooth blades. So the reason I've got two is because you can get different widths of blades and they do different jobs. So in this big machine, I've got a 3/4 inch wide blade or a 19mm, and that's great for ripping timber down, straight cuts, also resawing planks of timber. It gives a really good straight cut. In the smaller one, I've got a 6mm or a 1/4 inch blade, which is great for doing curves. So you could put like a 10mm or a 3/8 inch blade and it will do a bit of both. But for me, I've got the space. I had the two machines, so I've kept them. One I do curved work on, one I do straight work. So if you're not that lucky, you can either buy a blade that'll do both, or you can swap the blades out. But in my experience, if you put a general use blade in, say a 3/8 10mm one, and you cut curves, it's very hard to keep the blade cutting straight after that. Once it's cut a curve, it probably won't cut straight again. So my advice is have a wide blade for cutting straight and a narrow blade for cutting curves, whether that's in two machines or you swap the blades out when you're changing what you're doing. So this is a page from the Axminster catalogue. Now it goes through all the different blades and what the difference is. So as I said, I bought the ground tooth blades for my machine. A thing to consider is the teeth per inch, the TPI. So I always go for a lower number TPI just because the gully is bigger and it can clear the waste quicker, and it'll give a better cut. It won't start binding and it won't start burning. Whereas if you go for a finer tooth blade, then they tend to clog up more. So with a bandsaw, you're never going to get a perfect finish. You're always going to have to either plane it or sand it afterwards. So if you're trying to get a fine finish with a fine tooth saw, you're still going to have to clean it up. So I'd recommend a slightly rougher finish, but a better cut and a faster cut and a more efficient cut. So that's my advice, and I go for the ground tooth blades. So as I said, I buy my blades from Axminster, and this machine's from Axminster. So I'll leave a link in the description below to this machine, although they've updated it. It's no longer blue, it's just grey, and these blades as well. So go check that out. The bandsaw blades come wrapped up like this, and this is the easiest way to store them. Now the teeth are sharp, so you can wear gloves for this. I generally never wear gloves for anything. If you try and unravel this, it's gonna hurt your hands. So a shocking way to do it is try and get a board on the floor so you're not going to ruin the teeth on a concrete floor, and then open it up slightly and then let it go and hear the noise it makes. That was nice and safe. I haven't cut my hands, I haven't ruined the teeth. So to wrap it back up, there's a couple of different ways. The way I've always done it is I put my foot on the blade, I fold them two bits in, the two sides come in, and the top goes underneath. Just do that and it folds up neatly. And the other way to do it, which I never tend to do, is again put your foot on it, turn your hand round, grab it like that and twist it, and it folds up like that as well. And to store them, I just hang them on a screw on the wall. I've unplugged both machines now and I've opened them up just to show you the inside and the different quality of what you get. The budget machine is what it is. It's a budget machine. It's got very light, flimsy wheels on it. All the adjustments on it are plastic, and a couple of them have broken on me and I've had to fix them. It's got a smaller motor which isn't as powerful. The fence is shocking, terrible. And then to change the blade, you take it out this slot and you've got to take this piece off here, which is a bit annoying. So the industrial machine has got very solid cast wheels, good tyres on the wheels. The adjustments are plastic, but they're of better quality, and up to now none of them have gone wrong on me. It's got a more powerful motor in it. It's got a heavier table. The slot to take the blade out is at the side, so you don't need to take the fence assembly off. The fence on it is brilliant, so the guarding is much better quality. The tilting of the table locks brilliantly into place, whereas the tilting of the table on this is a bit flimsy. So my advice is go for the best you can afford, and if you can find one like this, I'd highly recommend it. So with the machine unplugged, always unplug it just to be on the safe side. It has got mag switches on it, which when the door's open it shouldn't turn on. And I'll take the blade off now. So on this machine we've got a quick release lever which will relieve the tension. It's good practice to relieve the tension on it when it's not in use, especially when it's going to go for a long period of time without use. It'll save the blade from stretching, and on a budget machine it can also stop the frame from twisting. So release that. So I've released the tension. Now I'll just undo this knob at the top and I'll release a little bit more tension. Now I've got to take this pin out. So because the table's split, it's provided with this pin which should keep the tables flush to each other. That just pulls out. Now with the blade loose, I can bring it out of the door side. I forgot to take the table insert out. Just pop that out. Then carefully I can feed blade out of the guard, and same again at the bottom. Again, you probably should wear gloves for this, but I never do. So there is tension in the blade, so watch it doesn't whip and catch you. So now it's out top and bottom. I can twist it round. There we go. That's out. Now the bigger blades are more difficult to fold up. So my preferred method again, bring the sides in and the top under. And that's how you fold it up. And to undo it, just chuck it. Noise out of that. Now is a good time to do a little bit of maintenance. So I've got myself a parts cleaning brush, stiff bristle brush, and just give everything a good dusting and vacuum it out. I done this before the video because I didn't want to show how dusty it was. A good thing to do is grab yourself a slightly dull Stanley knife blade. If you look on the tyres, you get like a build up of sawdust and resin. Bottom one's usually worse because all the rubbish falls down. So it's a good idea just to get the Stanley knife blade, a dull one, so you're not cutting into the rubber tyres, and just scrape away some of the rubbish off the tyre. Because if you can hear that and see that, that's creating little bumps, so it can cause a bit of vibration in the blade. That build up of rubbish on the tyres is caused with the dust and the debris and the resin. So it's always a good idea, if you see the back here, there's a dust port, so always use good extraction to take away all the dust, and you'll avoid most of the build up on the tyres. So now I will put the blade back on. Before you put the blade on, you need to make sure the teeth are pointing in the right direction. On most machines they'll give you a little diagram of a blade and they'll show you the direction. So the blade travels down and cuts on the downstroke, so the flat of the teeth is at the bottom and then it angles back for the gully. So the blade I'm about to put on, if I can focus there we go. So the flat is pointing down and then the gully is above it. So always make sure you're putting them on the right way. It's just the reverse of what I've done to take it off. I've just seen the weld, and I'll mention that Axminster make these blades. They make them themselves, and if you look at a good quality blade, it's got a good quality weld which you can barely feel. So I just thought I'd point that out while I've got the blade in my hand. I need to feed it through the slot. So once it's in the slot, take it past all the guard, the bottom and the top. Sometimes it's easier to lift the guard out of the way. Take that right up out the way. So you've got to hook it round the wheels. Doesn't really matter whether you do the top one or the bottom one first, but what you can find is you put it on the top, you go to do the bottom, it'll pop off, or vice versa. So a handy little tip is to get yourself a couple of little spring clamps, and once you've got the blade over the top wheel, put the little spring clamp on it, put two on just to be safe. That should hold that there while I do the bottom one, and then the bottom one I just do the same again, just feed it over the wheel. and get it roughly centre to the tyre. So the tyre has got a slight camber on it. So if you looked at that one, it'd have a camber or a bump. So the bump is designed so the teeth don't dig into the tyre. So you want the main body of the blade in the centre of the wheel and the teeth slightly forward. But because this is the maximum size blade, it's that anyway. The teeth are right at the front of the tyre anyway. I can take the spring clips off now. Make sure the blade is still where it should be. Then I can put the tension back on with the handle. So the tension of the blade, that's a question a lot of people ask. The best place to test for the tension is this side of the machine, the door side. So I'd say you want probably about 5 mil flex. So if you gauge it between the side of the machine and the blade, so that's about 10 mil in there. So if I can flex halfway, that's about 5 mil. So maybe a little bit more than that, so tension it a little bit more. You don't want it to be able to touch the body of the saw. So using the knob at the top, so as I'm turning that, it's lifting the wheel up as I'm turning it. So it's putting more tension on that blade. So to set up the blade, I've just took all the bearings out the way so I can get the tracking right on the blade without any of that interfering. The tracking is done at the back of the machine with this knob here. So that's a locking knob, so you undo that, and then as you turn that knob, we'll tilt this wheel either forwards or backwards, so it'll bring the blade either forward or backwards on the tyre. So what I do is I spin the wheel by hand, slowly at first, so the blade doesn't pop off. Now I don't know whether you can see that, but it's gone straight to the front. So I need to adjust the tracking on the wheel to take the blade back. So now, because I've done the tracking, it's took the blade back ever so slightly and it's travelling where it needs to be. So that's where I want it to be. The body of the blade is on the tyre and the teeth are just to the edge of it. Once you're happy with the tracking, tighten the locking knob. Now that the blade's on, I can put the pin back into the table and I can start adjusting all the bearings and the safety guard. So I'll wind that down a bit. I'll put the table insert back in. So if we take a closer look at all the guarding, we've got the rear thrust bearing, which stops the blade from being pushed back, and then we've got a bearing either side of the blade which stops it from wandering side to side. So we've got to adjust them now. All there is an Allen key. If you look at the bearings, you want them just behind the gully of the blade. You don't want them to touch the teeth, because then your teeth are going to go blunt quite quick. Every machine's different, but this one, you put the Allen key in and the centre is slightly misaligned. So as you turn it, the bearings go closer to the blade. So you want it so it's probably about a millimetre away from the blade. And then I can lock them down so they don't move. And then the rear thrust bearing, so I want that again about a millimetre behind the blade. And then lock that down. And then I'll do the same underneath, but because of where it is, I don't think I'll get very good footage under there, so it's exactly the same process as the top, but a lot more awkward to get to, so I'll do that off camera. Next thing to do is to check that the blade is square to the table. I'll lift the guard out the way, and then with an engineer's square, and put it this side of the table because there's a split in the table there. This side's more guaranteed to be flat. There could be a slight bump in this side of the table, so generally go off the flat side of the table. Move that over. That's pretty much perfect. So once you've set that, you shouldn't really have to set it again. Check it every now and again, but if you do have to adjust it, at the back of the machine, if you look, there's a bolt there. So if you look underneath, the table actually rests on this bolt. So if you wind the bolt down, the table will go that way. If you wind the bolt up, then the table will go that way. And you just undo the two locking nuts, adjust the bolt with a spanner, and that's how simple that is. But well worth getting it right. Part of my routine maintenance on the machines, I give the beds a little wax just to make the wood glide through them. Now the bandsaw is not that important, it's more important for like your table saw and your plane and thicknesser, but it's well worth doing the bed. It only takes a few seconds. And I use this machine wax again from Axminster, and I'll leave affiliate links in the description below. It's a little bit of very fine wire wool. Nice bit of wax. Just give it a good rub in. I'll just give that a few minutes to soak in, and then I'll buff it off. A little bit of kitchen paper, and just buff off the excess wax. Gets all the dirt off. Now I love it when I've maintained the machine tables, because they just glide like silk. So pushing the timber through there will be effortless. Now that's all set up, you might want to go through and check that you've tightened everything back down, but I've been through that, I'm happy, so it's time to close the doors back up. So the next thing I need to do is align the fence to the blade to allow for drift. Because it's a narrow blade and sometimes it gets slightly more worn on one side than the other, it can drift, so you need to set the rift fence to the blade. So I'll show you how to do that now. I've got a piece of board, bit of MDF, 18mm. Now it's got one straight side on it. Bit of safety. When you're cutting anything on a bandsaw, the guard wants to be as low as practically possible. Now butchers use bandsaws such as these to go through flesh and bone. So this will easily go through your fingers, your hand, your arm. It'll even take your leg off if you put it in there. So you want this guard as low as practically possible, ideally about 5mm away from whatever you're cutting, so there's minimal chance of your finger or anything going in there. So that guard's all set up now, but before I start cutting, I'll just talk about a couple of accessories that I think are essential to a bandsaw. So the first one is the roller guide. So it's a tiny little table on a bandsaw. Unless you've got a big industrial machine, they're always going to be small tables. So if you're feeding something through, it's going to drop off. But if you put the roller guide, set it to the height of the table and put it behind, then whatever you feed through will be supported. So that's the first one. The second one is a push stick. So with any saw or machine, you always need a push stick. Now with machines, you always get these plastic ones. Bin them. I don't like plastic push sticks. I just make quick MDF ones. 15mm MDF. Quick little shape like that. you want it the correct size, which is 350 to keep your hand 350mm away from the blade. From the notch to where your hand is about 350mm. You want a good notch in the push stick so you get a good grip on the wood. And when you're using a bandsaw, it's a good idea to have two. One to feed the wood through and the other to hold it against the fence. It can always be one of the first jobs that you do on the bandsaw is make yourself a good push stick. On the scrap of MDF, I've drawn a line parallel to the straight edge. Now what I'm going to do is run it through the blade, and then I'm going to alter it so it's running straight to that line. And I've put a bit of tape on the table so it shows up better on camera, and I'll draw the line of the straight edge of the board, and that's what we're going to line the fence up with. So I cut that until it was going straight, and then I'll just put a pencil line along there, and that's what I'm going to line my fence up to. So I don't know whether you can pick that up on camera, but at the back it's touching the line. This end there's about 2mm off. So on this machine I've just got to undo them 4 bolts, line it up, and then tighten the bolts back down. So that's got quite a bit of adjustments on there. So I'll just get it lined up as best I can. Make sure that it hasn't moved, and just give them a final tighten. So now I can put the rip fence back on. And that looks pretty much spot on. I've got a chunk of 6x2 here, so let's see how it cuts. Now, safety glasses are an absolute must. You might want to wear hearing protection and steel toe cap boots. And as I said before, I've set the guard to about 5mm above the workpiece. Now, I do know someone who was working on a bandsaw. He had the guard too high. The blade snapped and it actually whipped out and cut through his hand. So that's another reason to always have the guard as low as possible. So if the blade does happen to snap, it's going to whip inside the machine and it's not going to whip out and catch your hand. So for me, on this bit of timber, that's a good a cut as I'd want to see from a bandsaw. It's got a rough blade in it. It's 3 TPI, so about one of the roughest you can get, but that's a smooth cut and only a little bit of break out there. So a little pass with the plane, or a little pass on the surface planer, get rid of that. Well happy. A good test to see if your bandsaw blade is square to your table is to do a little cross cut. Go in, say about 10mm, and then turn it round, offer it up to the back of the blade, and if it fits in the same slot, then it's nice and square. So let's see how I've done. So there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say that's square. The small bandsaw blade is great for cutting curves, but if you need to cut quite a tight curve, then what you can do to ease the pressure on the blade is do a series of relief cuts. So as you're cutting the curve, these bits will just drop away. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I've taught you everything you need to know about setting up the bandsaw. Now, using a bandsaw, because it's so versatile, it'll take a few more videos to show you what it's capable of. Maybe that's something for the future. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.